if we need to come up with a function that matches this graph, what Newton recommends is trying to find the graph of the function that goes between, and then if you can find this red function, then it's just the corresponding reciprocal function. So like if this is a cosine graph, which it looks to be, then we can write it as a graph of secant. We can just replace cosine with secant once we have the red graph. Okay, but it really depends. The problem that I was given doesn't say whether this is supposed to be graph of secant or cosecant. You could make this as either secant or cosecant, which would make the setup of the problem a little bit different. So just be aware of that. You got to do the one that Newton's asking for. If it says make a graph of secant, you could write it as cosecant, but Newton's going to mark it wrong because it's looking for the graph of secant. Okay, so assuming this is looking for secant, then this red graph looks to be a graph of cosine of x. And the reason why I'm thinking that is because it's starting at the very peak of the sine wave. Cosine of x, if we don't manipulate it, it starts at the top, goes down to the bottom, then comes back. So we're in good shape for cosine so far. It's starting at the top. So for this red graph, I'm going to first identify the midline. So this looks to be the midline, y equals -2. So in my structure, a times cosine b of parentheses x plus c, where c is the horizontal shift, the phase shift, plus d. Right now I know my d is a -2 because d is just the equation of the midline. So that y equals -2. We've got our midline. A is the amplitude. That's how high or how low we go from the midline. And look, we rise 0.5 or we fall 0.5. So I'm going to say 1/2, which is 0.5 for A. And then B can be determined by using the period. Okay, the period of our red graph, it repeats itself every pi units. There's a distance of pi until we get back to the start on the y-axis. So the period is going to be pi. This is the equation for finding a period. We can plug in pi for the period. And then we can solve for b. If you multiply both sides by b and then divide both sides by pi, you get b is 2. And then there's no horizontal shift. We start right at x equals 0. If the graph was like if it was like this that we were trying to make, let's make this be the peak. Right? This doesn't start at x equals 0. This has some sort of horizontal shift going on. Okay, I think we got everything. There's no horizontal shift. We have the vertical shift. We go down 2, because that's the equation of our midline. We got the amplitude, and we found b by using the formula for the period. So this is the graph of red. So our secant graph is 1/2 secant 2x minus 2. Just replace cosine with this reciprocal function.